You're watching Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. I'm Also Young. When the Taliban took over Afghanistan over a year ago, it was a devastating return to the past for the Afghan people, to a society ruled by fear with the erosion of basic human rights, particularly for women and girls. In a country already grappling with the return of a repressive leadership, the challenges of building a safe and sustainable society have grown exponentially, particularly in the wake of the food, oil and supply chain shortages taking place globally. The United Nations missions in the country have continued and ramped up their already strenuous efforts to provide essential services and build a secure future for all Afghans. We have joining us today Dr. Abdallah Al Dardari, resident representative of United Nations Development Programme Afghanistan. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us in Seoul this morning.
Thank you very much for hosting me today.
Thank you. It's an honour to have you in the country and in our studio as well. And well, your organisation last year, you warned that 97% of Afghans could fall into poverty as a result of the spiralling economic and political conditions there. And well, how has the past year of Taliban rule really affected the daily lives of Afghans, and how has this affected their path to sustainable development?
Well, events of 15 August have just compounded a deteriorating economic situation that was affected very badly by COVID-19. So already poverty levels were at 70% and inflation was very high and unemployment was really high. But since 15 August, we have an increase in the prices of food and fuel for more than 35%. And therefore the percentage, the share of food in Afghan ordinary people's incomes have now reached more than 70%, which doesn't leave enough money to buy anything else, or even especially for fuels and other basic needs. Afghanistan's poverty level have increased to almost above 90%. Unemployment doubled again. The country lost 700,000 jobs and lost 20% of its GDP in just 6 months. This is enormous loss. And of course, with the contraction of foreign aid, the disappearance of foreign aid in one day, which represented more than 40% of GDP, the impact is just disastrous.
And what really has been the impact on is the provision of essential services as well? I know your organisation is doing its best, and it's really been pulling all its resources together to really get the aid and support out there. But just how has it really affected your missions there?
Well, think about it that last year we were bracing for the worst, meaning that the winter was setting in. Already 19 million Afghans were dependent on humanitarian aid. That number increased to 22 million today. And even though we managed to avert the worst last year, now we are facing another winter. And so it's a continuous challenge in a much more difficult situation. We don't have a banking system to work with. We've been bringing cash, loads of cash in airplanes to Kabul airport and moving that money from Kabul airport into the banks that we deal with in order to distribute cash in the country to the Afghan people. So it has been almost an impossible logistical operation, and this is expanding and growing, but we are faced with challenges of dealing with the authorities and challenges of shortage of resources from the donors.
Right, and you're dealing with external factors as well, like the oil prices, there's quite a crisis going on all around the world, and food supplies because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. I mean, how are these factors really playing into your missions in Afghanistan?
Well, providing food for 22 million people is not an easy exercise. So the World Food Programme and the rest of the UN humanitarian team have done incredible efforts in order to provide that in these global supply chain challenges. At the same time, ironically, some Afghan traders have been buying cheap Russian wheat because now Russia is trying to provide or sell as much as possible outside its traditional markets. So things sometimes play in an ironic way. Nonetheless, it's a tremendous challenge. There isn't, as I said, a banking system to buy imports from abroad. Logistics are very difficult. Bringing the trucks that carry food for 22 million people in a country practically without roads is a huge challenge. We have succeeded in the last year, but we need to know, and this is what I'd like to stress, that we cannot just keep feeding people. We need to create jobs. Without creating jobs, the number of people needing food aid will only continue to rise.
And I believe you have a program in terms of, you have a flagship program in order to move forward that. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, well, before 15 August, most of our work was focused on supporting national institutions, especially at the center, in the capital. And we found out that 15 August could be an opportunity to move our programs into the people, towards the people, with the people. So we designed this area-based approach for development emergency initiative, ABADE, and ABADE means recovery and resilience in local languages. And that program now has managed to work directly with large number of communities, creating almost 600,000 temporary jobs and supporting 34,000 women-owned enterprises, in addition to many other activities in the country. So that for us is an example on how you can supplement the humanitarian work with resilience and recovery and livelihood activities.
Right, and these efforts are particularly needed for women and girls, I imagine in particular. You've previously emphasized really how much worse the situation is for that demographic who are already grappling with all these extreme and very dire circumstances before the Taliban takeover as well. So how has the past year really affected women and girls in particular?
Well, you can see visibly the disappearance of women from public life. We don't see women in civil service anymore. We don't see women teaching in secondary education because girls can't go to secondary schools. We don't see women in health as we used to before. And therefore, the share of women in the labor force participation has dropped by 34%. And that's a huge loss. We estimated that the loss incurred because of women withdrawing from the labor force is almost $1 billion in just less than a year. This is a dramatic loss, and we tell the Taliban about this all the time. It is not just the human rights that women should be able to work and study. It is also an economic imperative for Afghanistan. In fact, labor productivity of women in Afghanistan is higher than men labor productivity. So and they are such brave and resilient women. They keep joining our programs. They show up, they attend meetings, they insist that they want to work. And I am honored personally and my team that we managed to reach tens of thousands of women during this time to provide them with finance, support, technical assistance, and market connections.
I see, and all the more international support is needed, and but there's always a funding gap, really. What are the current efforts, or how much more do we need, really, just to help with those efforts?
Just to put things in perspective, the national budget, which was mainly funded by donors, was $7.7 billion. Now the national budget is $2.6 billion. So you can imagine the huge contraction in spending. We, as a UN, for the Transitional Engagement Framework of 2023, we requested $8 billion, $4.4 billion for humanitarian work, and the others for livelihood and sustaining the communities. We got $2.2 billion so far. So there is a big gap between the needs and the available resources, which makes it more imperative that we focus on using that money to create jobs and livelihoods so that we don't need the same amounts of money next year and the year after and so on.
I see. And what kind of role has South Korea been playing in really helping with your efforts in Afghanistan so far? And what role do you see for it going forward?
Well, in the past 20 years, South Korea invested about $600 million of development aid in Afghanistan. At the moment, since 15 August, the country contributed $5.5 million in humanitarian assistance. So I came here with my team to talk to our Korean friends and counterparts, first to say thank you for the $600 million, but also to say that if we don't invest in livelihoods now, we would lose the $600 million we spent before. And humanitarian assistance is very important, but it's not enough if we want to see Afghanistan on a trajectory of some recovery in the next decade.
Right, in South Korea itself, it was a country that went from basically the ashes of the Korean War to a very modernized economy within a space of maybe 3 decades. And what hope do you see for Afghanistan as well? Because you work with everyday very promising women, young entrepreneurs even, and just you're building up this community of potential for the country.
Well, you see, one of the main reasons why we come to Korea, mainly because this country knows and feels what it means to come out of the ashes. And therefore, we are trying to build bridges between Afghanistan communities, small businesses, young innovators, and to link them with their possible counterparts here in Korea. The startups, the smart young people who are innovating every day. So that's one reason why we are here. We are not just trying to bring aid money from Korea to Afghanistan. Those days should be over. We need to look at new ways. The social contract that built this country is the greatest example that Afghanistan can learn from. So we would like to take that and see and explore together. And also we are looking for new types of funding, not just the classical grant aid. We are looking for private sector investments. We are looking for corporate finance and corporate guarantees and so on. This is how we learn from the experience of this great country.
I see, but as ever, the political conditions, though, it always remains a little bit of an uncertainty factor for the international community. And in terms of really balancing that, I mean, how do you see the whole picture moving forward, I suppose?
Well, you see, the political situation inside Afghanistan and in the global context regarding Afghanistan is very difficult. And we have to maneuver within all those minefields. But do we have another choice? That's the question we ask. We are not in the area of political analysis. We are in the area of making things happen. So yes, it's very difficult. Yes, it's risky. But at the same time, we don't have a choice. We have to find ways and means to bring assistance to the Afghan people in new ways. I'd like to stress that all the time, in new ways. And Korea can provide part of these new ways of thinking and innovative recovery. So challenges are really important. However, there are opportunities, and one of the main opportunities is now we are dealing directly with the people. And it may have been at the beginning a negative thing that we lost our central programs with the central government, but it's appearing now that working directly with the people is much more effective and much more cost effective, actually.
Right, I see. And lastly, as an economist, what do you think really lies ahead for the Afghan economy? And in terms of moving forward in sustainable development, what support is really needed from the international community?
Well, Afghanistan can only achieve, if things continue as they are today, can only achieve 26% of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Which means we need a completely different trajectory to get out of the poverty trap it's stuck in, which means a different type of assistance, different type of economic activities, different type of economic structure, and a different type of political economy, which is more inclusive. It brings women and men equally in the economic activity, and it gives voice and agency to the youth and to the women and to the minorities and everyone in the country. Now, that is a very tall order, but it requires us as international community to have that vision and try to transpire it to the Afghan counterparts.
Well, as you mentioned, so I don't think it's a choice anymore. It's an imperative as the global community to really do what we can to ramp up support and assistance there. And we really thank you for your efforts, and we hope that we can do all we can to help our Afghan friends get through this winter and beyond that as well, and really prosper as a flourishing economy. And
Indeed.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Dr. Al Dardari.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Thank you also to our viewers from around the world. Global Insight is on Arirang from Monday to Friday. Thank you very much for joining us, and wherever you are in the world, have a great day.